Hi, I'm Kathryne Friend. Today I'm in Amsterdam and I'm joined with Kobi Ampoma, Head of Talent Acquisition for Heineken in the Netherlands. Well, first off, Kobi, thank you so much for joining me today. You're actually my first podcast guest for the new relaunch of EMEA Hiring on All Cylinders. So I guess before we kind of jump into our conversation, I know obviously you're very active in the space and you speak at a lot of events, but if anyone who hasn't met you or come across you before, would you mind giving us a quick introduction?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm very honored to be your first guest as well. So the people who don't know me, my name is Kobi Ampoma. I actually lead the talent acquisition function for Heineken in the Netherlands, leading a team of around 18 people. I'm very, very passionate about the TA space. I'm also a dad of 3 kids, Liv, Nathan Jones, and then my partner Rose, which I've been together with for 25 years now. So and I'm originally from Ghana. I also mentioned that because that's where my roots are.
Absolutely.
And I came to Netherlands when I was 11 years old. So for the people who don't know me, that's the highlights that I can share with
The
you.
highlights. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. So I think, kind of bringing it back to inclusive hiring in
Mhm.
particular, I think at times it can feel quite abstract.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes, it's a little bit unclear for which direction people want to go in with it. So, from your perspective, what are the day-to-day actions that you feel can truly make that difference in creating that inclusive hiring practices? And where do you think some teams maybe misunderstand that process?
Mhm. So I think, if you look at the day to day, there are different things that teams or people who are, trying to bring in talent or have inclusive hiring practices.
Mm.
It starts with understanding your story when it comes to being inclusive. Learning what the hiring managers, their story is, why it's important for them, to bring in diverse talent or have inclusivity. Um, it's also an element of making sure that the language that you speak when it comes to your job description is as gender neutral as possible,
Mm.
right? So that's a typical example. Also having structured interviews, and I can give an example because this is something that we're actually going through right now. So we are hiring graduates for our company,
Mm.
and we had around 1,000 people show interest, and we invited I think around 80 people physically to go through the interview process. And we're working with a company to help us have better structured interview questions because it's a global program. And what we realize is that sometimes, having structured interview questions feels a little bit more, you know, constraint because you're not
Absolutely.
really flexible with that. But what it does is it does give you a much more of an objective point of view how you assess a candidate,
Mm.
because everybody is getting the same questions. And I do believe, within our current company, we do our best to have structured interviews, but obviously the TA is not always part of that. So
No, of course.
sometimes that can derail and may be a little bit unstructured. But we do try to make sure that these are a set of questions or these are a set of competencies that we want, a hiring manager or the hiring teams to at least go through with candidates.
Mm.
So I also think that having structured interviews is also one of the ways to go. The other part of having inclusive hiring is, where are you tapping into the talent? Typically, you are as an individual, have your normal university that you go to or your communities, but also if you are part of a bigger team, as those team members, hey, where do you normally, attract your talent from? And can I also tap in, right? Because
Mm.
if you're part of a team, let's say 2 or 3 people, and you focus on one area, by tapping into your colleagues, network, you widen your network immediately. So I think that's those are the key things that you can do. I think the misconception that people have when it comes to diverse hiring is, yeah, only the diverse pipeline
Mm.
element of that.
Absolutely.
So I think, if you have your own storyline, the manager have their own storyline, you look at having structured interviews, at least have a form of, gender neutral languages. That is a foundation that you can build on. One of the things that we have is we also have something called inclusive hiring practice guidelines that
Mm.
we share with managers. And it's before you start the process, during the process, and after the process, how can you be as inclusive as possible? Within Heineken, we make sure that all the people managers go through an inclusive hiring e-learning
Mm.
module, which is mandatory, which also provides them some insights on how they can be inclusive as leaders. So I would say, these are things that we are doing for sure, and we are also trying to embed more because obviously that's not a standard,
No, of
and it will
course.
take time for it to be much more natural
Yeah.
than it is right now.
And so when you say like the guidelines, is that something that like in every hiring process that you go through, it's almost like that reminder of like, this
Yes,
is how we can make sure that we're setting this process up to be as inclusive as possible.
exactly. And we have like a 6-pager documentation that we share, up front for our kickoff meeting, so that managers can also get themselves familiar, and then we can talk them through when we actually engage them through the conversation.
Yeah. And what is the, I guess, I know we've spoken about this before, where like, and that Heineken are really passionate about
Mhm.
DEI, but have you worked in a business where maybe there's been a bit more education or like, I guess, for one of a better phrase, like convincing or bringing people on that journey that you've had to do a little bit more with that?
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com.
2 previous companies before, and I think there was a startup, a scale-up organization where um, the founders really believed in it. I
Mm.
think for me, when you talk about D&I, it starts with leadership. I can be very passionate about it, but if leadership is not creating a space where it's a topic that we can discuss, it's going to be very difficult for me to be happy
Mm.
there. So one of the advice that I also give people is that, hey, typically in the D&I space, you're doing all these things on top of your normal day-to-day job, right? Unless you are, the D&I manager or you head up the D&I function, then that's part of your role.
Mm.
But a lot of ambassadors and a lot of people who are passionate about topic who are doing this on top of their role. So I always tell people, hey, whatever company you work for, just make sure it is a topic that is also important to them,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
otherwise you are want to pull and then nothing is really happening. So for me, it starts with leadership. Do they have a sense of important topic that they want to push? And then the element of education also kicks in, because I do think that you need to have a foundation where you assess where are you as a company.
Mhm.
You cannot tackle everything.
No, of course.
Then it's also about, what kind of topics can we define is important for us right now? What can we maybe do on a short term? What can we maybe do on a mid to long term? And then it's a journey.
Mm.
Not every company has it perfectly.
No, of course.
The world around us is also changing constantly, that we need to also adapt our strategies around that. So I think as long as you have a journey that you want to embark, where you can take people along, right? And some people you need to maybe convince more, but also the success story that you can share to convince those folks, I think is going to be very, very important.
No, absolutely. And I think like the point you made earlier about like leadership is really important. I think that what we actually found in our recent state of TA report, that 65% of TA professionals really see DIB as priority,
Mhm.
but 41% are reporting of not necessarily having like the budget
Mhm.
or like the backing from the business. So I guess like I know you've touched on some of these bits already,
Mhm.
but how can TA leaders specifically champion
Mhm.
DIB effectively in these conditions,
Yeah.
particularly when they might feel or might be in the position, particularly with everything that's going on right now,
Mhm.
that they're the only ones pushing for it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's always a tough one, especially if you have some constraints, right? But I also do believe that D&I is not always about investing, let's say money, but it's also creating the space. You can have, for example, what I mentioned around the inclusive hiring. That is not something that we use the budget for. It's just a collective group that came together through our D&I ambassadorship and said, hey, how can we educate? How can we make sure that this is a topic that people feel comfortable to discuss? And how can we make it different in our hiring process? And we didn't need budget for that. Yes, maybe the budget that costs is that, people spend maybe half a day of their time, during the work hours or even after work hours to put in the effort for that. So I don't think it always has to do with a dollar amount. But I do think it's very important to have leadership on board. And sometimes it does comes as a constraint because they may not see it. But this is not even me saying it, but I mean, McKinsey brings out a report every year. BCG brings out reports every year how important D&I is for organizations, the return on investment, the innovation aspect of D&I. And I've seen it with my own team. I believe I have a diverse team, and it's something that I really, really believe in. So I put that to practice. And I've seen the different ideas that we were able to come up with just by having a different thought or different people who are bringing different thoughts to the table. That really makes a difference. So I really believe in it. And I think that sometimes it can feel as a constraint. But yeah, you need to be intentional because otherwise you're not going to make a difference.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And obviously, like with your team, like I know your team has helped like challenge a lot of established norms in some of the businesses that you've worked in before. Can you share an example of a traditional hiring practice that maybe was unintentionally excluding talent and how your team ended up rethinking it?
Yeah. So this is something that I think I started a long time ago, and it's called the wild card, and I've spoken about it a few times already. So for me, having somebody who, maybe typically will fit the job description maybe 40 to 50%, right? Compared to somebody who's maybe 70 or 80%. I call them the wild card. People who are very, very passionate about the opportunity themselves, have done research, they've spoken to maybe people in the company or people who are working at competitors to say, hey, if I get an opportunity to talk about this role, I'm going to nail it. And I feel it when I talk to them in my pre-screening call. And as a result of that, I discuss this with the manager or hiring manager and say, hey, I know you may, from the get-go, it may not sound like the typical candidate, but please give it a try. And it has worked for me tremendously. So this is something that my team also tried to introduce to the hiring manager. Sometimes there's success, sometimes they're not.
No, of course.
But, just trying a different approach has worked for me. And I must say that, and you don't do it immediately. Also, you have to build a rapport and a relation with a manager to build some kind of trust to say, you know what, Kobi has done a great job, providing talent to my organization. Let me take a chance on this talent and at least have that conversation. And then it depends on the talent to convince them in that conversation as well. And sometimes they come out thinking, wow, I didn't know, that this individual could maybe make an impact. And then when we hire them and they do bring value or they do make an impact, and some talent has also, progressed their careers into the organization, then I think, wow, I'm very, very happy that I was part of this this part. And
Absolutely.
I also see that my team also are very proud when those, success story happen.
I think it is. It's one of the really rewarding parts of talent acquisition, isn't it? Like being able to bring someone into the team that has done so incredibly well that, may not have necessarily been considered in the first instance.
Yeah.
I love the thought of it, like the wild card.
The wild
piece.
card. Yeah.
So do your leaders in Heineken know you well for that now? Is that
Well, I wouldn't say they know me well for that because I don't do the recruitment myself nowadays. My team facilitate that, but it's just that we want to bring a different thought to the table. It's something that I will definitely say that, hey, we recognize that. If you look at all the research, it shows that there's less people being born, less people entering the labor market. the older generation has to stay longer in the labor market. So as a result of that, you need, as a company, need to also tap into different communities which you maybe have overlooked.
Yeah,
And I think that, the bicultural community is one of them. But there are more. I mean, one of the other communities is, for example, mothers who are re-entering the labor market.
absolutely.
That is sometimes also overlooked. And one of the communities called Every Mother Knows. And I've been a parent where back in the day, it was very difficult to even have part-time because typically the company expecting your partner to actually work less.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm in a relationship where we do a lot of things 50-50. At least we talk about it before we make a decision.
Yeah.
It's not a given that my wife is supposed to do, this. So I think that those are all the different things that companies should also consider, especially if we talk about there's a lack of talent on the labor market. That's what I believe in.
No, I think it's a great point. I think, particularly we can maybe get bogged down in looking at certain areas of DEIB, and actually, I think it's so important to think that it's such a wide spectrum. There's more, so many different facets and elements to consider. And I think the point that you made there about bringing the communities and putting more spotlight on there is a really great one. So,
Yeah, and I happen to have that background, right? So,
yeah,
and I think it's normal for anybody who's part of a community to make sure that they highlight their respective community, and it's also building allies with different communities. So, for me, I think companies should tap into that much more because there's a lot of great talent out there who are not being seen or not being given the opportunity that sometimes can help companies out.
absolutely. Um, and then I guess, we talk a lot about measuring
Mhm.
DEI initiatives. Um, and I think sometimes, particularly if there's like certain things that we're not able to track, like there's obviously there's limitations that are associated with that. How do you feel organizations can measure the success of their diversity initiatives beyond just the hiring numbers to make sure that they are genuinely creating that inclusive environment?
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge to measure for sure. But I think one of the things that, for example, we try to do is the gender balance, right? That you can measure. One of the things that we also try to measure is, how's our funnel, in terms of the gender balance. And I'm actually, how to call it, is one of my objectives that has been set with my manager in terms of making sure that every hire that we make, there is a gender balance element of that. So I try to preach that to my team, which hence they also have to make sure that, if they are presenting a slate, it's as balanced as possible. So that's one part of that. I think, if you talk about, having a diverse workforce, if you have town halls, you can see if you're diverse or not diverse enough, right? So sometimes you cannot measure, but you can really see that. So I think that that's also a component that can also be very, very important, and you can easily do. I think also, we need a little bit more support when it comes to, the government and institution to help us or enforce companies to measure because, how do you call it? There are some limitations when it comes to what can you actually measure.
Absolutely.
And I think, you can always opt into some measurements. But for example, one of the things that we try to do is also measure during our climate survey, right? Do people feel how inclusive they are? So as a manager, I get measured on the engagement of my team and the enablement element of my team. And last year I had a great score. So very, very proud of that, which means that my team, they feel heard, seen, and they feel enabled to do their job. And they also want to be in their environment to do their job. So those are also things that maybe you cannot really measure it from a hiring perspective, but you can measure how inclusive people feel within the company and also the sense of belonging that they feel. And we do it within Heineken with our climate survey.
No, I think that's a really great point. I think it's, there's the belonging piece to really sort of take into consideration. Where do you feel that the responsibility and accountability for DEI? I know we've talked about leadership.
Yeah.
We've talked about that piece before. But, I think there's so many different areas of like, should it sit with the TA team? Should it sit with HR? Like,
Mhm.
who do you feel? Do you feel that that's right? Do you think it should sit with us and we should be always championing for that,
Mhm.
particularly if we're not necessarily seeing the leadership buy-in? Or do you think it sits somewhere else?
I think it's a shared responsibility, and that's not maybe the answer that people want to hear. But I really believe it starts at the top, right?
Yeah.
So, is it part of the strategy, right? You know, typically HR is not defining the company strategy. They may
Mm.
have an input in the strategy, but the C level typically dictates what the company strategy is. In 3 years or 5 years time span. So, is it being defined there? If the answer is yes, how does it then show up in the different sub strategies that people or
Mm.
teams are building? So, for example, if I look at my own strategy, it has 5 different components, and one of the components is, how do we better embed inclusive hiring?
Mm.
Right? We play a very important role in that. How we show up externally, how we communicate externally, how can we challenge hiring managers in their thinking, in their approach. I think we can play a very crucial part in that. But we also need ambassadors. We also need sponsors. And those sponsors could be different, key stakeholders within the respective company. I know that my manager is a very, very important key stakeholder, and our managing director is also very, very important key stakeholder when it comes to D&I. And he has said on numerous times, hey, Kobi, if whenever you feel that the business is not open into, at least having that dialogue, please make sure that you escalate that to myself, right? Because I find it a very important topic. And yes, it's a journey, but what I would like us to do is that, every year, every quarter, we are making progress in some kind of improvement. Are we going to change overnight? No, but at least, in our time that we are a part of this company, that every day, every month, every quarter, every year, we are making progress towards that. So I think that's a very, very important part that we can play, and that is a shared responsibility. I cannot only drive this if people are not supporting.
No, and I think that's it's a really fair point. Like it can't just sit on one person, but I think we know that. I think like the key point, I think if there's for any members of like TA list, I think is making sure that conversation is always being had.
Yes.
I think, it can, particularly if it feels like you're not necessarily making progress or getting anywhere with it, like and naturally, when the business picks up speed and, want to hire as quickly as possible, sometimes those things can get pushed to one side. And I think it's like making sure that we're focused on bringing that to the forefront
Yeah.
at all possible
Yeah.
opportunities.
And somebody told me a few years back, and he mentioned, Kobi, whenever a topic is not part of my calendar, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually, is not important. So we need to make sure that D&I is a topic that is coming back on different moments of the year,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's not going to be important.
And that's it. And I think actually kind of like going back to that point that we were saying before, when hiring picks up,
Mm-hmm.
if, some with all the best planning in the world, we know that sometimes there's demands in the business and, we need to hire as quickly as possible. And sometimes, rightly or wrongly, DIB or those initiatives kind of do get forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
Like how would you advise like anyone listening or the businesses to make sure that you are keeping it on the calendar, as you said, and you are
Yeah.
keeping it forefront, even when speed is potentially being more of a priority?
Yeah, I think it's having it integrated in your process as a standard. So one of the things that we have done, and I cannot take full credit of that because my team were instrumental. Obviously, I helped facilitate, but we have created something called the aligned way of working within our team, which means that our processes for 80% is standardized, and everybody in the team is working along those lines. We are actually embedding it as we speak, or since the beginning of this year, is that we've broken down our recruiting process in 6 different key moments, right? Think about the kickoff meeting, think about your job posting, think about your screening and interviewing, think about your offer making process, and think about your onboarding. Those are, those key pivoted moments. And we've actually done a deep dive. Hey, how do you actually do your pre-screening? How do you do your pre-screening? Hey, what are the best practices that we can take from how we both do it, right? And make sure that this is best in class or this is best practice. And as it becomes normalized in our way of working, it doesn't matter if we're ramping up, it doesn't matter if you're slowing down. That is a consistent and standardized process, right? As a recruiter, I know that you also want to have your own personality and your own twist or your own flavor. But, even if it's 75% standardized and you have 25% your own twist, at least it doesn't matter where we are, that is a process. So bringing the D&I into the conversation in your kickoff meeting, that doesn't change if we are ramping up or slowing down, right?
Makes sense.
Making sure that we have a diverse panel doesn't change if we're ramping up or slowing down, right? So I do think that those moments that are key in your process, as long as it's standardized, that can help you make sure that, you still capture, the D&I essence and the inclusive hiring, even though it's a slowdown or you're ramping up.
And how would you advise, like, I guess, like outside your team, but like engaging with stakeholders, like to keep it front of mind and
Yeah.
because I think that's the challenge, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
facing the competing priorities from the business and saying, and I think there's always been instances, hasn't it, where we can only hold out for, making sure that we're kind of considering things from a diverse and inclusive side, but I need to hire tomorrow.
Yeah.
So how, would you advise teams to kind of bring the hiring managers on board and help them understand like why that's so important to maintain, even if you're looking to rush through or get someone in seat as quickly as possible?
I think it has to do with, being mature as a professional as well. We have a lot of TA talent that are maybe young in their journey in the TA space. So it's very difficult sometimes, if you have 2 years or 3 years experience to talk to somebody who has 15 years experience, right? It can be daunting, I would say.
Absolutely.
So I think the role that any company or any TA leader can play is, how do I equip my team to have those conversations? It doesn't matter which time frame or time we are in. Obviously, building rapport. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts and I read a lot of books and listened to a lot of talks on other senior TA folks when they talk about what is important in TA space. Typically there's an element of speed, and, there's an element of quality that plays a role, but also understanding your business. I think that everybody can recruit, if I'm honest, right? But there are not a lot of great recruiters out there, right? And I believe the great recruiters are the ones who really understand how the business make money, right? So if I ask any, TA, do you know how we make money? And you cannot answer this question, it means you've not invested in understanding how your business operate, right? And I know a lot of hiring managers, if you understand how my business operate, right? That's already, how to call it, you score points with me on that.
Yeah.
Because then I know that you are invested in understanding how we operate. And as a result of that, you want to do your best to bring in the talent who's going to help me with the problem that I have. So I think that's something that a lot of talent individuals can do or talent leaders can do. Try to understand their business. One of the things that I also ask leaders when I'm working with them, hey, can I have access to your teams and can I have access to maybe some key meetings that you have for us to understand your business a little bit better, right? And some companies are much more complex, so it takes much more time to get there, but at least invest the time to do so. I think if you do that, you'll be in a better shape, to have those critical conversations or crucial conversations with your key stakeholders, hiring managers.
Oh, absolutely. And, we've talked a lot, today about like the different things you've been involved in. Like you're obviously very a huge advocate for this space, really committed to driving inclusive hiring practices. Is there a defining moment in like your career that's like really shaped this commitment, or that's kind of, raised that point? Like, this is something that I'm really passionate about and helping people on this journey.
Yeah, I think for me, it happened maybe 10, 11 years ago. And what actually happened is that typically when I go to conferences, and I've been going to conferences for a long time since I've been in the TA space, some people always joke that you're always everywhere, but I've been doing this for, last 12 or 13 years. But I always find myself to be the only one in the room. And I always thought, why am I the only, colored person or bicultural person in the room? sometimes I may find another female or two females or another brother, as we would say. So it started me thinking like, hey, why is that? Obviously, it could be that people don't find talent acquisition interesting, or they don't like it, or HR they don't like HR. So it had me thinking, hey, why is that? And then through other conversation of people that I met who were feeling the same, is that there was not a lot of representation, right? I mean, you hear that a lot, but I figured out, let's say 10, 12 years ago, that there is not a lot of people who look like me, who are in senior positions that I can look up to. And I always thought that, me being in the TA space, me working for a lot of companies, I actually like the company that I work for. So I don't understand why people don't want to work for that company as well. So I started to be an advocate and being a role model in everything that I can do. And I would say that was one of the pivoted moments in my career to say, hey, what can I do? And then let me be a role model and hope that I can inspire other people to say, hey, if Kobe can do it, I can do it.
And thank you so much, Jen. I think it's great to hear like what's kind of driven that. And you are, as we said before, you are everywhere. We're talking like I could walk down the street, we've bumped into a bunch of people that but no, I think that's incredible, like really really inspiring. And I think like I hope it kind of, particularly like the mentorship work that you're doing as well, like helping people feel confident enough to do that themselves.
Yeah, I try to do my best, and to be honest, also I had a conversation with Kimo, who's the founder of OMAC, and he said, you know what? I mean, when you give back, you also give you a great positive feeling yourself. So when you see other people do good, or when you do good, it also gives you, I think, the energy to continue. And in my case, it is definitely the case. It doesn't matter who it is. I love people to, do good. And I hope that's the energy that I bring. And if I can impact anybody in any shape or form, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. And obviously we've talked about like taking things like one step at a time, and obviously you can't change the world tomorrow. If there was like one piece of actionable advice to give TA leaders or TA teams about starting to drive things forward with DEI in their businesses, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the unconscious bias piece. What I've seen is that people judge each other just based on what they see. And my thing, the quote that I have is, don't judge a book by its cover, but read it first. So, for example, if I look at myself, nowadays a lot of people know, but a lot of people don't know that I'm a political refugee, came to the Netherlands, try to make, something out of my life through mentorships. I've had mentors, I think 22 years in my career now. I still have mentors to today. And those individuals have been very pivotal in my career and how I've navigated that. So, I think what I'll give a TA leader is that, don't judge a book by its cover, but read it first. And there's so many inspiring stories out there who can make an impact in your respective organizations, and give people a chance, give people a chance to have at least that conversation. And I tell people as well, I cannot, unless you're part of my team, which I can actually offer you the opportunity, the only thing that I can actually do is give you an opportunity to have that conversation, right? And it's up to you to make sure that you are fully prepared. Obviously, if I can give you any tips, I would. But when you get the opportunity, then make the most out of it, right? So that's the advice that I would give a lot of TA leaders to consider talent from that perspective.
No, that's great. I think that's a great piece of advice. Thank you so much. And then I guess just to wrap it up, what excites you most about the future of talent acquisition today?
The next 10 years or the next era or the next decade of talent acquisition is going to be very pivotal for us, because I believe we play a very important role with AI also at the forefront, and technology coming at a rapid speed. There's a lot of discussion going on in terms of what role we from a TA space are still going to play. I do think that AI can help us a lot when it comes to automating things, helping us maybe source better, helping us save time when it comes to, the administration part of our work that we do. But the human element is still going to be a very important deciding factor for people to make a decision when it comes to saying yes to an opportunity. And I really believe in, everybody should go through a process where, we as a company are as transparent as possible, what they will get themselves into when they join the company. And make sure that that process or that journey, the candidate journey is as smooth as possible and that they have a positive feeling, even if they don't get the opportunity. I'm very, very excited about that because I think we can play a very important role. And like I said, the companies that really invest in their people and attract the right talent and help them develop are the ones that are going to make a difference, in the coming years to come.
Absolutely. And I think that the point you made about the human element being so key is something that we need to make sure that we always keep top of mind, particularly with the AI. Like, absolutely. Okay. And then where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your work or where you're speaking at next?
Yeah. So obviously people can connect me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very easy to find. If you type in Kobi, you start with A. I'm typically the first person that shows up. I do work with Roots Inspired, where my mentor there, so people can also find me there as well. And obviously, I contribute to OMAC as well, the advisory board members as well. And then I think my next speaking engagement is going to be, I think I'm going to be in Budapest in the coming weeks. And I'm also going to be in Berlin. We are developers. So that's where people can at least find me. And I'm going to lay low for a while.
Quite a lot in Q2 and then just chill out for a little bit.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and just being so open and transparent about your experience. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. And I wish you success in your coming podcast. And I must say that you did great. So I'll continue doing this. If you want to, continue the space, I approve.
Excellent. Seal of approval. Appreciate it. That's it for this episode of Hiring on All Cylinders. So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're not already part of the Hire community, then again, feel free to join us by signing up at www.hirehq.com. It's totally free and you'll be part of the largest TA network in the world. Thank you again, and until next time.